Yeah, if you could call the meeting to order and then I'll move forward from there.
Okay, do we need to do a roll call also?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, call this meeting of the Halsey Land Use Hearing Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:36. Call roll.
So Mitch Little,
Here.
Tim Lawrenson,
Here.
Owen Alders,
Here.
Dan Sunday,
Here.
and that's the full quorum we have on the seat.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hold a public hearing to consider file number COH 2024-08, which is a land use application submitted by Leland Zehr to construct an industrial warehouse building. And he's represented this evening by Laura LaRoque from Udell Engineering, who is in the audience. So we have the application and the applicant is present to participate. I'll go through the hearing format and the hearing process, but Ken will recognize people and ask you to please give your name and address and whether you are in favor or opposed to the application when we get to that point in the agenda. But the first thing I will do is I'll go through some of the land use proceedings that we need to go through, and just bear with me as I kind of walk through this. This is a public hearing to consider land use file 2024-08, an application from Leland Zehr Construction for approval of a site design plan for the development of a 0.56 acre piece of property in the 1300 block of West First Street in Halsey. A copy of the agenda and the hearing procedures or the format should be available to the audience. The Planning Commission will consider the application, written and oral testimony, and the criteria that's listed in the staff report when making its decision to either approve, deny, or continue the consideration of the application. All testimony, any arguments, evidence received during the hearing must be directed at the approval criteria from the code or to such other rule, law, or regulation which any person believes applies to this application. If anyone has any objections or questions regarding my statement or these proceedings, please raise those questions when it comes to your turn to speak during the hearing. And just for the record, Leland Zehr, the applicant and the owner, just walked in and has joined the hearing. If you testify, please state your name, your address, if you support the proposal, are opposed to it, or have questions. And please try to limit your testimony when you're giving comment on the application to somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, though the applicant can take as much time as they need to present the application. At this time, I'll ask the Planning Commission members if, and the audience, if there are any objections to the notice of the public hearing that was sent out to adjacent property owners or to the applicant. And if there are any objections, and I don't see any. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the Halsey Planning Commission to hear and consider the case? And I don't see any objections, so the Planning Commission has authority to make the decision related to this application. I'll now ask the Planning Commission members if they have any conflicts of interest or any ex parte contact, which means primarily contact with the applicant or anyone else outside of this hearing. And are there any conflicts?
No. Well, I've hired Mr. Zehr for a project that I have, but I don't feel that that would be a conflict of interest.
Okay. Will it affect your ability to be impartial and make an impartial decision related to this application?
I don't think it make any difference.
And Mr. Chair, do you have any concerns with Ann participating in the hearing?
No, I don't.
Are there any concerns from the audience member of Ann Sunday participating in the hearing? Okay. Are there any ex parte contacts or bias, meaning having any contact with any people outside the public hearing related to this application?
No.
And seeing none from the planning commission, now move forward. With that, we'll go follow our standard hearing agenda process. And the first item on the agenda would be the applicant's presentation of the application.
Good evening. Thanks for being here this evening. The application before you is a site development review. The proposal is for new construction of an industrial warehouse building. The site is located at West First Avenue. The building itself is proposed to be just under 7,000 square feet. The site is a half acre. Included with the building development is construction of associated parking, stormwater detention, public utilities improvement, and street frontage improvements as well. This application, included in the packet is a site plan showing the property layout and development proposal. The proposal, in short, does comply with all the development standards such as setbacks, lot coverage, building height, design, orientation. And included in the presentation is, in addition to public improvements and site improvements, is landscaping along West First Avenue. So I will be brief in the presentation, and we do have the project engineer. If you have any civil engineering questions, or the property owner, if the commission has any further questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I don't.
Any questions right now of the applicant?
Only thing I noticed on the plan is there's a second access on the property. Further down, where you, looks like you curved in and paved.
Yeah.
Onto a narrow section of the property at the bottom. Is that for further access to additional parcel or?
The primary, so there's access to the parking lot, and then the secondary access is intended for loading and unloading for trucks.
So it's to come in the backside of the warehouse.
That's correct, yes. And I guess that does highlight one of the items. The proposed access to the parking lot is shown as 50 feet wide. There is a note from the planning review staff to limit that to 36. And we as the applicant would be okay with decreasing it, but would recommend or suggest 40 feet instead of 36 just to allow for circulation to the site. Any additional questions?
So with that, Leland, do you have anything you would like to add at this point as proper?
I don't think at this point, maybe later when I hear it all play out, I might have a question or two.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask, Audrey's got the plans on the screen, and I'm going to ask her to go to the second page. Right there, one more, third page. So the proposed building is at the intersection of First Street and Crowell Lane, and then First continues on down until it intersects down further to the south. Ken just asked the question about this driveway approach right here on the south end of the site, and that will be to allow trucks to be able to back in and get to the loading dock that's on the corner of the building. So that hopefully that clarifies that. The driveway that Laura was just referring to is right here, and my concern was that this is shown as a 50-foot wide driveway entrance or driveway approach. I think it can be narrowed up some. I don't have any real concerns with 36 or 40 feet. Either one of those seems to be acceptable. It was just, it seemed like it was a little bit too wide for that frontage because the prime entrance to the parking lot was a little bit to the north edge of the site. The light or the gray area is the paved area, so they will be widening that section of First Avenue as it goes around the corner. If you've driven down there, you see that particularly as you get past this pavement section, you go around the corner, it's quite a bit narrower, and by doing the widening, it does give trucks and vehicles a better opportunity to be able to get in and out of that back driveway area. As Laura indicated, there were some recommendations for utility improvements. And if you can go to the next screen. one more. There's an existing water line that extends down to the site. The closest fire hydrant though is 325 feet to the north. And the typical spacing requirement for a fire hydrant should be one every 250 feet distance between the two. So the recommendation is there be a fire hydrant added somewhere in this location. I'll let the applicant's engineer talk to the city engineer and whether they want to see it located up on this corner or down in the frontage area. That really is an engineering choice, and folks can figure out how to do that. But it seems to me like that needs to be there to meet the standard fire flow requirements for the city.
Excuse me,
Sure.
what's the size of that existing water main that's down there? Do you know?
I think it's a 6, isn't it? Or is it an 8? I think it's a 6.
And it dead ends down there?
It's
not blue.
Yeah, it's got a blow off right in this area, so there may be.
Okay.
That's why the location of the hydrant may be there versus there. There is a sewer line and they would just be connected into the sewer lines on that side of the street. It's just a quick tap and being able to extend it into the property. Parking, this plan shows 8 parking spaces on site, I believe.
So,
7?
8.
8, that's what I thought. And that complies with the minimum requirements for an industrial warehouse type of building. If this was being used for a commercial office or something like that, the parking requirements would be a little bit higher. But for a warehouse facility, this meets the minimum standards. They're also showing, Lori indicated, a detention facility. And that's basically just a lower basin to be able to capture stormwater during peak rainstorm events. And then that will be able to then meter out into the adjacent landscape strip and get out to the larger pipes that cross under First Avenue, which are located on the next lot over. They're showing some cyclone fencing around the property, particularly around that detention basin, so it's for safety purposes. And you're also showing a fence line along the railroad track edge on the east side of the property. And I believe that was identified as a 6-foot or 8-foot. I know the fence height vary. That's just a very quick review of some of the standards. They the applicants did not identify the type, who the tenant would be in the property at this point in time, whether their construction firm would occupy or use the property, or whether they would be leasing it out to someone else, and I'll let Leland address that.
Yeah, so as of right now, it's just kind of a tentative, but the person that was maybe interested would be thinking of using it for a welding shop. Doing welding in there. It's not a real. I'm not sure if it's even gonna happen if it's approved yet, but we need to get through this process, but that's what we've been exploring at this point. Now, if it got approved and that guy fell through, then I don't know, after that, someone else came along and fit the use, and I'd be approved, then we'd maybe continue on with the project. If not, we might just put it on hold. So that's about all I know or have for the possible use of it at this point.
The written staff report that you have goes through all the code criteria. I'm not going to go through it section by section. We'd be here for an hour or so if there's no need to do that. At the very end of the staff report, I reached a conclusion that the proposal does comply with the basic standards in the city's zoning and development code. And I've recommended to the planning commission that the planning commission approve the development, but subject to a series of conditions of approval. So that's starts on page 13 of the staff report. And the conditions of approval are pretty straightforward, that they would submit The final site development plan, which is the engineering plans primarily to the city engineer for his review and approval. Calls for the applicant to submit a final landscaping plan to City Hall. So it can be reviewed by the city administrator and myself before the building permits can be approved on the project site. It also indicates that the site plan approval expires in 1 year, but gives the opportunity under the city's code, if the applicant doesn't proceed immediately in the next year, they do have an opportunity to apply for a time extension if they need additional time to construct the building. And I believe that's a one-time extension for 1 year. There are some permits and agencies approvals required. One is because they'll be doing work in the public right of way, water, sewer, and street improvements. They have to have a construction permit from the city that is based on the approved engineering plans. The city engineer may require that they provide a performance bond or guarantee that the improvements will be completed, or the city engineer could say they're nominal enough that they should just be part of the building permit. And I'll let the city engineer make that determination. The public works standards, we've talked through most of those, and there are requirements that they do the storm drainage, the water and the sewer, and the street improvements concurrently with their project. They will have to complete the parking lot improvements prior to occupancy. And they will have to submit that final landscaping plan and complete those final landscaping work again before certificate of occupancy is issued on the building site. The site plan does call for the planting of street trees spaced, I believe it's every 50 feet along that. Those might get adjusted when you see the final landscape plan, just to make sure they're not creating any problems with visibility or clear vision as people are driving down the street or getting to the driveway approaches. And with that, my recommendation to the planning commission, as I said, is to approve it subject to the listed conditions of approval. If there are any changes that you find after this hearing, the planning commission does have the opportunity to either add or modify the conditions of approval. With that, the next item on the agenda would be to call for any proponents' testimony, any people in the audience who would want to testify in favor. Seeing none, the next opportunity is to any persons who are opposed to the project have an opportunity to testify at this point in time. Seeing none. Now, the last one is general testimony. If there's any agencies or if there's any general comments or questions that people in the audience have, you have an opportunity to do that at this point. Also seeing none. Any questions of clarification or issues that the planning commission feels that the staff or the applicant has not addressed as part of this project?
I'll see pretty cut and dry.
Well, it helps when the engineers do a good job of it. Any summary, Laura, that you would like to make?
I don't think so. No, thank you for the overview and illustrating on the map. Anything to add?
I might have a question.
Sure.
I don't wanna confuse the issue, so I wasn't sure where to ask this, so if you wanna wait.
No, now's a good time to ask.
Since it's a little bit of kind of still trying to decide what's gonna happen for sure, I decided to proceed forward with this approval, or if it does get approved. But if for some reason there was some changes as we got into the project, how does that work? I've talked with you some about it, but I just wondered, is this start all the way over, do some kind of revision and then you review, or such as building size changing or shifting a little bit, or that lot being joined with the next lot north, which would create the ability to move that parking, you know.
Or do a joint parking lot, for
Right.
example, so it's something
Yeah.
like that.
So What in that scenario is the normal procedure? I think maybe Laura addressed it to me, but I just wanted to.
So I won't do the pithy answer, I will do a serious answer. So let's say that you were proposing, and the approval is for a 6,900 square foot building. Let's say you decide to modify the dimensions of it and shift the detention basin to the west and extend the building out another 20 feet or 50 feet. I would consider that a minor modification and it would go through a staff review. If you were going to change the location of the building from, let's say, this side of the lot back over to here and change the configuration of all the utilities and everything else, that's a major modification. If you modify the parking over here because you acquire the next lot over and decide that you're going to do a joint parking lot, as long as it didn't change the basic intent and allowed for joint use, you would have to go through a site plan review for this new lot for any building there. But we probably would consider that a minor modification for a joint access to a lot.
That's a bit of a judgment call. We can just present to you some of the changes and then you. Yeah, okay.
Right, there is a provision in the city's development code that allows for minor modifications to be reviewed and approved at the staff level. But if it's considered a major modification, which is like the ones I was describing, that has to come back to the planning commission.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other testimony at this point? Mr. Chair, you can close the public hearing.
Yeah, with hearing no more testimony, this hearing for the Halsey Planning Commission is now closed.
Okay. So the opportunities, so no more testimony can be provided. You can discuss among yourselves if there's any changes you would like to make or modifications. And as I said, my recommendation is that the planning commission approve the application subject to the listed conditions of approval.
Yeah, the only questions I had was the driveway sizes, if that 50 feet down there is going to be sufficient for a truck to pull in at the angle that it's at.
And that was actually, I was thinking about that as well when I drove down again to the site. And again, if there was a minor modification to that, if they need to get turning radiuses, I'm not sure whether you folks looked at that for backing motions for trucking at the site.
We did, we ran a truck template. I'm sure Leland would be happy to widen it though. The opportunity is there. We just need to make sure that it aligns with the driveway though.
Yeah.
So we could go wider.
It just looked like that you might be clipping that corner trying to bring a truck in there because of the angle of the road.
Yeah.
And then you already brought it up, but where the trees are placed, the view on that street, you have two streets coming in at an odd angle.
Yeah, we just
To make sure that we're not interfering with the view, not just with the driveways, but where First Street comes up and makes that right turn and you've got the other street coming in there. Just that's clear so that.
And again, I would consider that those items can be discussed with Devco Engineering, the city's engineer, to take a look at that driveway configuration, make sure that one works.
Mhm.
And then if there's some other minor modifications, I'm sure that Devco will let me know and we'll take a look at those.
And David, is there a specific size of retention pond, specific amount of area you have to have for the hard surface they've created?
There is calculations that are required, and then the city engineer will take a look at that to make sure that
Yeah,
the
and
sizing is correct.
You had mentioned maybe shifting things, and I look at that retention pond would get kind of small if it shifted. And I don't know if there's another location on that property where a retention pond could go. It doesn't look like it.
Not much. No, there's not much opportunity for expansion of that beyond what it shows.
Do you see that as a possible problem?
No, I don't. not for where it's located and how close it is to the major channel that goes out. It looks like it fits together. I looked at the city storm drainage master plan to make sure it fit together, and it does.
I didn't see any other questions on that, so.
Okay, if that's the case, I would suggest that someone make a motion, and it's probably on the last page or the second to last page of the staff report.
You would recommend the first one, the approval.
Yes.
And you just read to approve the site design plan for Leland Zehr and to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion, and conditions of approval for file number COH-2024-08. And I recommend that for whatever I'm supposed to say.
Do we have a second?
Yeah,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries.
Okay, the motion carries 4-0, and I will be issuing a notice of decision in writing. And we'll send that probably via email to both Laura and Freeland. And either it will be sent out tomorrow or Monday, depending on how quickly I can get it.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
And I want to say thank you to the two planning commission members who came in later tonight. I appreciate you being able to do this. We were scrambling and wondering if we were going to have to reschedule, so.
I had to come from Newport.
Well, thank you.
Those are terrific.
So his.
I thought we planned around you.
I know you came from Newport, so
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And thank you, Mitch, and thank you.
And I'm missing out on a Lions Club meeting right now.
No, you can make it back.
Oh, do we get mileage?
From your house to here, yes.
Not the 30 miles.
But thank you all very much.
One question, I'm sure for somebody that's, I'm not sure, but is it all right if I'm not sure what I'm gonna do, give
Oh,
me
yeah.
planning property, but in the meantime, I just grade it. Like, I'm not bringing in fill or anything, it's pretty rough out there, I mowed it, I sprayed it,
Just
there's some high on the one end and some low, it's just like. Level that all out, and that's just easier to maintain. So if that's okay, maybe you might see that happen this fall before.
Yeah, as long as there's no big excavation or major fill coming in.
No, we just be moving the dirt on site.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,